Okay, welcome to a short video tutorial about just the basics for Unity. So I want to keep this relatively short, just to get you used to sort of the moving the camera around, moving in a scene, working with some small objects and creating a very simple script to be able to do something with, I guess, our first sort of little Unity game. So when you first open Unity, you'll be greeted with this screen. We'll just click on New, and obviously we need to save our project first. We'll call this Intro to Unity. And I'm going to save it to the desktop just so I've got it in a nice easy spot for later on. So I'm going to use a 3D template, don't have to worry about changing that, and we just click on Create Project. Now it'll take a few moments to create. Unity may close while it does that, and you can see here it'll just take a little while. What we're going to do, we're going to make a very simple project where just we have a plane and a cube. And basically what we're going to do is be able to press the R, G and B buttons to change the color of the cube, just to show a very simple script in Unity. So here's the basic Unity layout. Now one of the things that I'd like to show is that you can actually change the way the panels and windows are set out. So on this side of the screen here under layout, if we select default, you'll see it's exactly the same because it's how it starts up. But you can choose 2x3, so you can see the scene view and the game view at the same time. You can choose a 4 split, which opens it up even more with different views for each scene. Tall, which you can sort of see a big section of it there, or wide, again, which changes the window view. So it's all the same windows are open, they're just sort of adjusted for what you would like. Now I tend to like the 2x3 view so I can see the scene and the actual games that are being played. But I drag the hierarchy to, or just to above the project here. So I've got the hierarchy in the project. I'm going to drag it down underneath and adjust the size there. So I end up with this little view here: scene, game, hierarchy, project, and the inspector. Now just to go over these windows again. So we've got the scene view here. This is where essentially you manipulate all your game objects as you create them in the game. This game view is showing you basically what the game looks like as soon as you press play. So the camera that you're looking through, what it is seeing. The hierarchy here, this hierarchy window or tab, this shows essentially all the objects that are currently active in your scene. So you can see this scene here, we've got a camera, and you can see it shows a camera preview here, and a light for lighting and creating shadows. Now we're not going to get into all the details about how they work, but just know that this is what the hierarchy view is for, to show you which objects are currently available to your scene. Down the bottom here we've got project, and again I can make a little adjustment. The project is where it saves. You can see here's the actual scene, the sample scene. You'll see up here we've got the sample scene loaded. Here's the actual scene being saved. This is where you actually see all the textures, any audio, any models, sounds, anything that is part of your game will exist within the project in the assets folder here. So at the moment the only thing we have saved is this scene within our project. So that's all we can see. The final area is this inspector window. Now if I click on main camera, the inspector window is going to change to show me every component that is currently attached to the camera. Now you can see there are 3 components attached. We have the transform, we have the camera itself, and the audio listener component. Now if I expand here, we can see that the transform has a few options. The transform is basically the position, the rotation, and the scale or size of the object in the game world. Now these things can all be changed manually with all these numbers here. The scale obviously won't make any difference to a camera because it's not something we're actually seeing, it's just a camera. But if we've got like a cube, we can make it smaller or larger. The camera has a whole lot of options here as well. Again, we're not going to change any of these for this particular project, just to give you an idea. And the audio listener is about, it's like having ears, so the camera also has ears on it to listen to sound effects. The light, as you can see, when you select on the light, the components that are within the inspector change to be components that relate to that particular object, being the light. Okay, so there are 6 main, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 main areas to work in within Unity. Alright, let's go and make a really simple project. So, what I'd like to do is put a cube in the game world. Now, before you do this, make sure you haven't got an object selected, because if you do, when you go right click, 3D object cube, you can see how the cube has become like a child of the light. See, it's been placed like on the light here. We don't want that. We want the cube to be its own object by itself. So I'll delete that cube. I just highlight and press delete on the keyboard. So nothing selected. I right click, 3D object, cube. And there's our cube right in the center of the scene view. Now to make sure, what you should always do, I'll close all these for the moment. What you should always do is reset the transform of your object. So it puts it back in the 0, 0, 0 position of your X, Y, Z planes and its original size. Now, I don't think this will make any changes, but you should always do it just to make sure, because sometimes it'll be moved or adjusted just a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing now, add a second object. This time it's going to be a plane. Once again, make sure you haven't got anything selected in the view, in the hierarchy. Right click, 3D object, plane. And this is just a flat plane that we can only actually see from one side, and I'll show you that in a moment. Now you can see here how the cube is actually being cut in half by the plane. What I'll do is I'll raise up the cube so it exists above the plane. So that's going to change its Y position. So again, I'll select the cube, and you can see the cube is highlighted. I'm going to just change its Y position to 2, and it moves it up 2 units in the world. One of the main things you need to be good at in the scene view is be able to move the camera. Now, if I hold, while I've got the cube selected, if I hold Alt and left click, it will rotate the camera around that object. Notice how the plane's disappeared. The plane only has one side that's visible. Okay, you can see there. So holding Alt will allow me to rotate around the object. If I want to move the camera, I can use the arrow keys. So it's forward, back, left, and right. I can scroll using the scroll wheel. And I can also right click to sort of rotate the camera but keep it fixed the position I'm in. Notice this is different to the Alt, where it will rotate around whatever object is currently sort of selected or centered in the screen. Okay. Also, to get your focus back on one object, you can click on the object in the scene view, in the hierarchy, sorry, move your mouse to the scene view and press F, and it will zoom and sort of attach back to the object in the middle that you've got selected. Okay, I can do the same for the plane. So I select the plane, F. You can see now it's sort of focusing on the plane as opposed to focusing on the cube. Okay, I'm just going to rotate around to get a bit of view here. Now here's my game view. If I press play, let's see what happens in our game at the moment. And the game has started and nothing happens. Okay, nothing happens at all. What I want to do is to get the cube to drop down with gravity. Now to do that, and I'll just save first, so file, save, scene. Okay, I don't have to give it a name because it's already got a name here. What we want to do is give or add a component to the cube. So I'm going to select the cube, and we're going to click on here, add component within the inspector. So I click add component and go down to physics, and I'm going to scroll down to rigid body. Now the rigid body component is, you can see here, it gives the cube some mass, and it gives it drag, use gravity is selected. So it now is going to operate, it has a mass and gravity is going to affect it. So now if I press play, you can see how it falls down to the plane. Now this is all these calculations are all being done by the Unity engine itself. We don't have to do anything for this. Now you can code your own physics later on, but for most of our games we're just going to use the Unity physics. Okay, the next thing I wanted to look at, actually before I continue on, I'm going to show you this little tool up here. This thing is called the gizmo, and this is another way for us to select certain views. So if I want a top-down view, I can select the Y, and you can see how it's rotated the view to look straight down. If I want to look on the side, I can use the X, I can use the Z, another different angle, all these different angles that I can use that are exact angles. Be careful you don't press the box, because that changes between an isometric and a perspective view. Now, generally speaking, our games are going to be created in perspective view. This is isometric, this is perspective. You can see the name will change here, so it's at the moment it's perspective, isometric, let's run that down, perspective. We generally want to use the perspective view because that's a proper 3D view. Isometric is used if you've got a 2D isometric game. Okay, so back to perspective. There we go. Zoom out. Okay, now what we're going to do now is add a script to the cube. so we can change its color by pressing keys on the keyboard. If I press add component, go down to new script, and I need to name my script. Now this is like naming the class that you have already learnt about using learning C#. So I'm going to call this class color change because that's what it's doing, and then click create and add. And you can see here this new script has been added to my assets, and this script is attached to the cube. So in the inspector I can see color change script has been attached to the cube. Notice the plane doesn't have a script, so it's not attached to the plane, it's only attached to the cube object. Now if I double click on the script, it'll open up in either Visual Studio on Windows or Mono Develop if you have a Mac. Now a few things we can see here. We've got our namespace section. Notice there's no using system like we've seen in the past. We are actually only going to be using the using Unity Engine namespace. Oops, I just need to update my license here. Hopefully this won't take too long. I type in authenticator code as well. Looks like I may need to edit this part out. These are the unforeseen consequences that you have sometimes when you are working with technology. And that should update in just a moment. And my license is about to finally update. There we go. Okay, close. Okay, so once again, we are using the Unity Engine namespace. So all the code we do here is actually part of the Unity Engine. You won't see some of this code for normal using system namespaces. You can see the class color changed. You don't need to worry about this public keyword. We've got two methods here already, start and update. We don't need the start method because that only runs when the game begins, but we do want to use this update method. This is called once per frame. Now, essentially, it's every single frame that the game is being rendered and generated. So this is just going to be constantly being run and checked. Now, what we're going to do is create some code that will change the color of the cube based if we press a button. Now, we have to do this using what's known as an if statement. So basically, it's if a button is pressed, change the color. Now, what we'll do for red, green, and blue, we'll use R, G, and B. So this is how we code it. So if, and then a bracket, input, dot, get, key, down. Now these are all, again, these are all parts of a class and a method that are all part of the Unity Engine namespace. You won't find these in the system namespace. So input, get, key, down. The key code that we want, so basically the key we want, is R. So key code dot R. Okay. And I'll put in the curly brackets. And then this is the code we want to be able to change the color. So get component. So we're actually going to get one of the components from Unity. And the one we're going to get is the renderer. And I'll be able to show you this in just a second. So get component renderer. If we go back to Unity, you'll see that the cube has a renderer here, the mesh renderer. And there's a few sort of different parts to it here. We're going to use this renderer and we're going to change part of it, but we're not going to change it by selecting these options. We're going to change it in the code. It's also to do with this default material down here, which you can see in the renderer. We're going to change this material, and at the moment it's a default material. Here is the actual default material, and we're going to change its color using a script. Okay, so back to Unity. So get component, the renderer, dot the material part of the renderer, and its color. And notice there's no U, so it's using the American spelling. This is going to be equal to color.red. And a semicolon to finish that line. And I do seem to have a mistake here. Get component renderer. Oops, I've got to put the double brackets here. Okay, so we need that as well. So what they're saying is, when the R key is pressed down, get the renderer component, get the material part of it, get the color part of it and change its color to red. Now I'll save this, so just press save, go back to Unity and press play, and the cube is going to fall, and if I press R, the color of the cube changes to red. Now you'll see here that the default material, so we've got the renderer, the material, which can be found here, its color has changed to red. Now we're going to do exactly the same for the other colors. So I can actually just copy this code and paste it once. If input get key down key code dot G, it has to be a capital letter as well. We're going to change the same thing, get component renderer, the material, the color, we're going to change it to green. Copy it one more time. One more time, G will change to B, the B key, get component renderer, we're going to change the color to blue. Save that. Back to Unity. Now, you usually have to take a moment just for the Unity to register a new a change to the script. Now, if I actually click the script here in the assets folder, you can see it's showing me the script that I've got, that I have actually saved. Make sure you press save or Control S in Visual Studio or Mono Develop. And I'm just going to save the scene as well here just to make sure that everything is saved. Okay, now let's press play. Okay, R for red, green, G for green, B for blue. And I can just keep changing them anytime because they are part of the update method, which is constantly being run. Every single frame that the game exists, it is being run. So there you go. So just a quick recap. We went through what each of the windows are, our scene, our game, the hierarchy with all our objects, a project with all the parts that make up our game, and the inspector, which shows you all the components that are attached to an object. We went through how to add objects. We went through adding some physics by adding a rigid body, and then we attached a script that enabled us to change the colors of an object. Hope you enjoyed it, and you can continue on from here with our first game.